In the United States and Canada, you can rent out your property on a periodic, month-to-month, or fixed-term basis. A fixed-term rental, often referred to as a lease, is an agreement to rent a property for a fixed period of time. There will be a start, an end date, and the lease won't automatically renew. In today's video, we're going to be going over everything you need to know about signing and ending a residential lease contract, what is the best option for you, and how you can end a tenancy. So once you have a good renter in place, you're going to want them to sign a 6-month or 1-year lease. And this is for a few reasons. The first is security. Once you have that renter found, you're going to want to have that consistent rent check coming in. If you took a mortgage out on your rental property, this will help you have security in paying for that mortgage, and you're not going to have to worry about where you'll find that money elsewhere. The second is less wear and tear. When you have renters coming in and out of your rental property less frequently, there's a lower chance for more wear and tear on the rental property. And the third is less expenses. When you have a long-term renter that's stable, you don't have to worry about all those other expenses in looking and finding and even placing the renter in your rental property. So once you found that renter that will agree to your terms, you should look at creating and signing a residential rental agreement, and we're going to be going over that next. So a residential rental or residential tenancy agreement will cover the following things. 1, the length of the tenancy. 2, what is the rent and if there are any potential increases. 3, what's included in the rent. 4, who's responsible for paying for utilities. 5, if you're allowed smoking or pets on the premises. 6, what the security deposit will be. And 7, out of the landlord and the renter, who is responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the rental property. Residential rental agreements are regulated by legislation set out by your specific province or state. For instance, in British Columbia and California, the landlord is required to provide a copy of the residential rental agreement to the renter as proof of the agreement is in place. So you'll want to be sure to check your state or province regulations specific to the residential tenancy agreement and see if there's any laws or regulations that you'll need to follow specifically. As a landlord, you get to decide what will happen at the end of the fixed term agreement, and you have a few options. The first is you can sign another fixed term agreement with your renter and rent out the rental property for that set period of time. The second is to go to a month-to-month contract basis with the renter. And the third option is to end the tenancy altogether and get the renter to vacate the unit. If you choose the third option, there should be a section on the residential tenancy agreement where you both can sign an initial to say that you're both in agreement of this choice. So what option is best for you? Well, that's up to you to decide. If you rent your property on a fixed term basis, you get that security and consistency from that rent coming in for that fixed period of time. However, you do have less control over rent increases, and if a sudden life event happens where you need to sell the apartment or you need to rent it out to family members and friends, you usually have to wait till the end of the fixed term agreement due to the regulations and legislation in place. So how can you end a rental agreement? Well, there are a few options for you as a landlord that we're going to cover here today. Reason 1. Non-payment of rent or utilities. You can serve your renter a 10-day notice to end tenancy if they've not paid your rent. Notice can be given the day after rent is due, and the renter has 5 days from receipt of the notice to pay the full amount owing. Or, if the renter so chooses, they may choose to submit and file an application for dispute resolution. Similarly, if the rent owing is paid in full, the notice will be cancelled and the rental and tenancy agreement will continue on as before. However, if the renter decides to go down the path of filing an application for dispute resolution, they'll serve you with a date for the hearing, and that will be another process you'll have to go through. If none of these options are taken, the renter will need to vacate the unit on the 10th day from which notice was given. The second reason is causing unreasonable damage. You can evict a renter for cause. If the renter is causing unreasonable and unnecessary damage to your property, or has been late paying rent at least 3 times and not necessarily consecutively, you can file a 1-month notice to end tenancy for cause. The third reason is landlord's use of property. There may be a few scenarios which you wish to end the tenancy. The first could be you've sold the home and the new owners would like to move in themselves. The second, you could have immediate family members that want to move into your rental unit. And third, you could be having large renovations or completely demolishing the rental unit and the tenant would need to leave. In many of these instances, you'll need to file a notice to end tenancy to the renter. This will give them 2 months notice at the end of the month when that notice was filed. But note, this can't happen during a fixed term tenancy. As well, renters aren't required to pay the last month's rent. This is intended to compensate the renter to help them with moving expenses, since you've ended the agreement on your terms and not theirs. So the new renter you thought was a perfect fit has decided to end the agreement prematurely. Maybe they left in the middle of the rental term, or maybe they didn't move in altogether. Now what? Well, there is a responsibility from both parties to upkeep their side of the agreement. If the renter decides to prematurely end the agreement, there could be compensation sought for the landlord for the lost funds. That said, it's not as cut and dry as owing the last month's rent or owing the amount remaining. You'll need to check with the regulations and legislations in place in your local state or province to be sure on this. There are some circumstances where it's well within the renter's rights to vacate the rental property under a fixed-term agreement, with 1 month's notice, of course. In California, for example, there are stipulations around where a renter can leave if there's family violence and if leaving the home will allow them to be safe. They can also do this if they're about to serve active military duty, or if the home they are renting is not up to the California health and safety codes. In cases like this, it's the responsibility of the renter to give the landlord the ending of the fixed-term tenancy confirmation statement. Typically, a rental agreement is used for shorter periods of time, usually about 30 days. And at the end of the rental agreement, it will automatically renew for another 30 days. However, with a fixed-term lease, it's usually set for a longer period of time, such as 6 months to a year. And at the end of the fixed-term lease, it doesn't automatically renew and instead will expire. So now you should have a solid understanding of what you need to do when signing and ending residential tenancy agreements, what the best option for you should be, and we've answered the most commonly asked questions around these agreements. So if you're looking for a home insurance quote or want to point your renters to a reliable renters insurance provider, you can visit squareoneinsurance.com.